love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me.
Hello, Miami. Thank you so much for watching 305 Sports Now. I am your host, Will, and we all know that it's game week. It is the Miami Hurricanes versus the Florida Gators, okay? So with me today to talk about the Florida Gators versus Miami Hurricanes is none other than Canes Insider. It seems like this man is everywhere, whether it's X, Locked On Canes, anywhere you can find, anything about Canes fandom, he is there. And this man is none other than Gio Milian. What's up, Gio? How's it going?
Hey, how you doing, Will? I'm excited to be here. Season's I shouldn't even say right around the corner. We're only just a few days away. I'm ready for all the pregame festivities. There's going to be a whole bunch of events going on the day before that I'll be at. I'll be at V's Pizza, a nice private dinner we're having out there with some alumni. And right after that, we got a party going on at Capone's hosted by Canes, where a whole bunch of alumni are going to be there too. Everyone's coming out to have a good time right before the game the next day. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's awesome, man. I know that Dono and company is gonna be enjoying themselves like yourself. They're enjoying themselves out there in Gainesville. I mean, especially since we hope that we end up the happy party coming out on Saturday. It was just going to end up being Saturday night. But I want to go over a little bit about possible Miami Hurricanes. They haven't yet signed the dotted line yet, but they're very, very, very committed. They're known as hard commits, according to, in reference to 247, is Luke Nickel and Malachi Toney. They tore the house down when American Heritage played against Milton, Georgia this past weekend. Both those guys look pretty solid. Luke missed a couple passes here and there, but when you're facing a top 10 team in the country, it can be forgiven, especially when you throw 2 touchdown passes and you light it up with your players like CJ Wiley. But Malachi was not very far, as Malachi also did very well with 2 touchdown receptions of his own and showed why he is one of the best wide receivers in a 2026 class. So, Gio, what's your take on both these individuals, and what can we expect from them as Canes fans in the near future?
Yep. So, Luke Nickel, I think I said this on X probably over the weekend. I said that he's just criminally underrated. And the reason why I say that is he led his team to a state championship last year. He also came down here to South Florida a year ago, played the Western Wildcats. He had some moments in that game. He's really stepped up in his progression between this offseason and heading to his senior year. He lit it up at Battle Miami. I was out there during that 7-on-7 event. Him and his whole team, they won the entire event. He plays for Cam Newton's 7-on-7 team. But his performance overall, just from the weekend, I was pretty impressed with what he did. He's also got some weapons on that team too. Ethan Barber, that's going to be heading to Georgia, the tight end there. He also has a tight end there that's going to go to Auburn as well. Ryan Gee, talented running back there that actually has some ties back to South Florida. And then just overall, what he did against American Heritage and his performance, just how poised he was, kept them in the game throughout, pulled it out. And that's stacking on top of an impressive win over a Buford, Georgia team the week before that. They are perennial state championship contenders in the state of Georgia. Luke Nichols had a really good offseason. You throw in an elite 11 there. He may not have your prototypical size that a 6'3", 6'4 plus quarterback that the NFL may look for, but he's about 6'1" and some change, maybe 6'2", a solid base. Really built well in his lower half, which is a very key thing for quarterbacks. Miami's really looked into that in terms of guys that they've recruited over the past couple of years under Mario Cristobal at the helm now. The other guy we'll talk about here, Malachi Toney. So locally, this is what they call him. They call him Baby Jesus. And I always wondered, what was that about? And they say it's just because he's so incredible, the things that he does on the field. I know you and me were talking a little bit about it before we got on the air here that, just in terms of slot wide receivers, he's one of the more impressive ones that have come out of the state of Florida and just South Florida in general for the past decade. Built really well too,
Hmm.
solidly built. He's actually gotten a little bit taller. Some people had concerns early on in his high school career. How big was he going to get and whatnot? It's about that 5'9", 5'10" range. He's gotten a little bit faster as well. Some people had some concerns in terms of his top end speed, but he's explosive, consistent, confident athlete too. I think that's one of the biggest thing that stands out when you watch him on the field, whether it's 7-on-7 when he's playing for South Florida Express, or there's this new team this year called Hellstar, or when he started playing with Raw Miami at one point this year too. He's always proven himself, even against competition that has been older than him. He's one of those guys that comes through South Florida every X amount of years that they star from the moment that they get to the prep level. So really like what he can do. Big time that he's a Miami commit himself. I know some people have had concerns about Ohio State and whatnot. I've actually overheard that he's very solid in his commitment to Miami, that there shouldn't be any concerns for any Miami fans about the Buckeyes trying to get in there and whatnot. I continue to hear a lot of positive things in terms of his commitment.
Going back to what you just mentioned regarding that he's solid, he is 2026, and you're already saying he's solid. Luke Nickel, one of the things about Luke is that he was a 3-star recruit. Miami saw something in him, and was one of the first teams to offer him. Luke was very loyal very loyal to the Canes because of that. They were the first teams that saw something in him and approached him with an offer. Is it the same for Malachi Tony? Since there were some concerns about his size, height, and even speed at some point, that Malachi's like, you guys believed in me, so I'm going to stay with you, Miami.
Well, I think the two situations may be kind of different. Luke Nichols' profile is really raised over the last 7 to 8 months, just between how he capped off his junior year, what he did during the offseason between 7-on-7 and then Elite 11, and then now how he started his senior year. I mean, if he doesn't see a bump in recruiting rankings, it's totally rigged. I used to work in for the recruiting industry services. There's some things that go on here and there in
Hmm.
terms of politics when it comes to rankings and whatnot. And uh, actually, the theory people have had about, oh, it also matters the amount of subscribers that a certain school may have for their website or their fan site. There's actually a little bit of truth to that theory.
Really
Yeah.
stupid.
So
It's really stupid.
where I would say the difference is with Malachi Tony, from the moment he got into high school, he's been heavily recruited. I'm talking about Alabama looking at him, Georgia, Ohio State, any SEC program you could think of, or big time Big Ten programs, they've all been going after him from the word go. So I think with him, it's more so you get that early commitment, you have to stave that off from other schools for so long, especially when it's a high profile guy. Usually, when it's guys that are kind of going under the radar and then they kind of explode, and then everyone starts coming in afterwards. Different scenario, and I think Miami tends to do a pretty good job with that. And even in terms of the case of Malachi Tony, uh, there's been guys that Miami has taken early during the Mario Cristobal era, and they've held on. And those were
Mhm.
high profile guys. The only one I could recall that was a high profile recruit that Miami happened to miss on, and they knew this was always a possibility, was Kevin Riley during the
Yeah.
2024 recruiting cycle, out of the state of Alabama.
Mhm.
They knew even the moment that he committed that there was always that lingering thing with Alabama that they would have to fight them off until signing day. But again, everything worked out fine. Miami landed Jordan Lyle at the end of the cycle. So it so many things come into play. But yeah, I would say there's a little bit of difference in terms of their two profiles and just kind of how you hold that commitment status.
Yeah. I agree with you about Luke before he transitioned to Byron Lewis, but I agree with you about Luke. I think it's a crime. In some circles, he's still a 3-star. I don't know what else he has to prove to elevate his status, because I've seen the kid on film. He can make any throw. He could elude oncoming rushers. He could read defenses pretty well. He hits the open target, hits guys in stride, even while under pressure. So I really don't know what Luke has to prove. But again, when he comes in, he had the Ruben Bain chip, in which in every game was 5th star. He could light it up for 20, 25, 25, 30 touchdowns his first season as a starter. We'll see what happens and what to say about him after that. So I do think that, and I said it, in my earlier episode, that I think Luke is the future of the Miami Hurricanes. I do think that he is the next great Miami Hurricane quarterback. No shade on Emory Williams. Emory Williams could turn out to be Ken Dorsey. We don't know that yet, but I think as far as like when he gets the reins, I think I fully I'm fully confident that Luke is going to be that guy.
Yeah. Where I'll chime in is I know there's people in Miami's corner in the building that really high on Emery. They knew there was some mechanical things that they had to work
Hmm.
on with him when he came into the program. I will share a little bit of backstory on this. Larry Bluestein was actually one of the first people that tipped off Miami about Emory Williams. And I think some people forget too that he ended up going to the Elite 11. Uh,
Yeah,
he didn't play with the best talent around him at Milton. Funny enough, same high
yeah, same
school
name
name,
school.
just like Nickel, but up in the Panhandle area in
Yeah. Mhm.
Florida. But we'll see. It's all about development. I love what Luke Nickel brings to the table. Even if you asked me personally, out of any of the quarterbacks that Miami has been recruiting or has committed within these last few years, I'm really excited about Darion Coleman. I think from a arm talent standpoint, he does things that the others may not be capable of. But he's so long away that it's just speaking a lot of hypothetical. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think Luke Nichols really intriguing. I think a competition between him and Emery in the future could be really how would I put this into better words? Really good for the program. You always want to elevate the floor of your room, and I think those two guys could push each other to be better. Unfortunately, in this day and age of college football, it's kind of hard to keep all those guys in the room, especially
Mhm.
if one guy doesn't end up getting the starting nod or wherever they fall on the depth chart. But that's just natural order of college football.
Yeah. All right, no, I totally agree with you. No, and I think it will be an open competition. I think Emery's gonna be really quality quarterback as well. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that when it's Luke's turn, when it's his turn to take the reins after Emery decides to go elsewhere, either the NFL or whatever his future might be, I do think that Luke is gonna be that guy. I do think he's gonna be, the guy to pretty much take the program to another level. All right, as well, just because pure talent, poise, and the understanding of the game, I think that he just has it. But again, I've heard a lot of good things about Darian Coleman. That's another guy. For a lot of people, he flew under the radar. Miami picked him up on a arm strength perspective. Brian Smith from Locked On Canes, who's a contributor to Locked On Canes, loves him as well. It's about the arm strength and the poise as well. So I am excited about Darian Coleman as well as a future Canes quarterback. But what could be a future Canes running back? Okay, is the possibility of landing Byron Lewis. Miami was trending very well for him early on. He then became a bit of a Florida State lean. From people I've talked to that know him personally or follow recruiting, they're not sure exactly where he's going. What have you heard about Byron? Because he was another guy that stood out in that game with against Milton. He ran all over them, as well. And he sort of reminds me about Willis McGahee, where he could run between the tackles, run outside, and also catch the ball as well and pass protect. Where are the Canes with him as far as recruiting goes? Where do you think he'll land? Is he a Florida State or Miami guy, or you just don't know either because he's been quiet?
I'll share this. This is what I know from that situation. I've known him for some time now, ever since he was an underclassman at American Heritage.
Okay.
When Mark Fletcher was the guy there, like even during Mark Fletcher's junior year, before Miami truly got on him, because not many people remember the story, but Miami wasn't all in on Mark Fletcher either.
Mhm.
Going into his senior year, it was really when that tape came up and he got into really good shape that they changed tunes. But on Byron Lewis, at one point he shared with me that he felt like he wanted to play his college football out of state. And there
Okay.
was a lot of buzz with Ohio State around him. They're not really in the picture anymore. There was some buzz with Miami during the spring. Miami's kind of taken the approach that they're not crazy about wanting to take a second running back in this recruiting class. And I can get it and understand it from a certain point. They're looking for certain body types. I'll boil it down to two simple things. They want your fast, electric scat back types, like your Chris Wheatley Humphreys,
Hmm.
your Chris Johnsons, your Gerard Pringle, who had a really good debut for his senior season against Norland just last week. Byron Lewis kind of falls in between the two, where he may not be as electric as those guys, has a little more power to his game, but not as big as the guys that you see like a Mark Fletcher or a Damian Martinez that they've brought into the program. So he's kind of in between the two. I know they really liked him at one point, especially heading into the summer months with the official visits, and they were kind of between him and Shakai Mills-Knight. Shakai
Hmm.
Mills-Knight ended up going with Ole Miss. I actually overheard they valued Shakai Mills-Knight even over Byron Lewis, but you know everything takes its course with the recruiting and whatnot.
Hmm.
What I can share though, Miami and FSU have been going back and forth, but the dark horse contender in that recruitment that no one's really talking about right now is Colorado. He has a really good relationship with Dion and that recruiting staff. We'll see how it shakes out. If you ask me right now, I think he ends up with Florida State. It's not that Miami's not recruiting him; it's just they're not putting all all their effort there, basically,
Okay.
and they have their reason. They're they've taken the stance that they don't feel it's truly a necessity to take a second running back. They really like where that room is right now, and don't even rule out if Miami looks at adding another transfer running back again when the winter portal window comes back around. We'll see. It's such a long way away. You have to see how the season plays out, any possible injuries or anything of the like. But that's Miami's stance.
Yeah. That's interesting because the pattern with Mario has been beef and lightning, or thunder and lightning, actually, to coin the phrase more correctly. So it's interesting that he's not that they're not very, oh well, we one with one guy, we have enough, especially since the running back room has had issues with injuries his first couple of years here, especially his first year they had a walk on running the ball. So I'm kind of surprised, at the fact that they're not going for a second, like more or less power back. But I get you. I get what they mean. I mean, there's other things they may want to work with as well, especially since it's a very defensive back heavy recruiting class as well. So I think that's more the focus, as well. Now we got to get into game time, man. As a Canes fan, as both of us being Canes fans, we do not like the Gators at all, and I wish they would stop. The whole "we'll play every 5 years" thing, and let's get it done already. Let's do a return to the schedule. Try to make it work like they do at Florida State, or at least every so often, every couple of years, do a home and home. We're not playing every 5 years, but the bottom line is that's how it is. And now we're going to the swamp. Okay, so now we're going up to the swamp. It's gonna be a very fun battle. I expect a very raucous crowd, like I'm sure you do as well. Um, Miami is favored by 2.5 points. I think Miami has a more balanced team, especially on offense. I think there's no holes in that team on offense. There's some questions about Florida's offensive line. How do you see the game, Gio? How do you see the game playing out? What does Miami have to do schematically to win? And what does Miami need to watch out for? That could be an area where Florida could catch Miami by surprise.
Uh, I'll start it from the Florida aspect of things that Miami has to watch out for. They like to do a lot of the quick game bubble screens. They like to get well, he goes by like two names. He goes by Trey Wilson or Eugene Wilson. We'll say Eugene Wilson. They're gonna try their best to get him involved as much as they can. He's a dynamic receiver. Miami has dynamic receivers themselves, but that's mostly what Miami has to key in on. Their cornerbacks, they need to come up and make tackles on the perimeter. They need to get off their man, shed blocks on the perimeter. That's the biggest thing because Florida likes to play a little more behind the sticks. They're not a deep passing team. This is just what comes up on the film. Maybe they've incorporated other things this offseason. We'll see during game one. There's always new wrinkles every year that coaches like to throw in. So we'll see what they are. I think another key there is if Florida can't have Montrell Johnson ready to go at running back, there's a ton of question marks behind him in that running back room against Miami's defense. And I think Miami's just that front seven between the linebackers that Miami has, and especially that defensive line where they can
Mhm.
go 8 to 10 guys deep and stay fresh. I think that's a lot just for Florida with their offensive line issues on the right side. They're still trying to figure out who their right guard is. They're not sure if their right tackle, if his health is right now, if he's okay to play. They're having a lot of issues there. And funny enough, that's the same side of the line that Ruben Bain plays at too. So that's going to come into play. Uh, that's really about it. Defensively, though, Florida, their secondary was not very good last year. I do think they have talent back there, though, between guys like Jordan Castillo. Uh, Jason Marshall has had his ups and downs throughout his career at Florida, but I, I think Miami fans kind of discredit him a bit in terms of the talent that he has. He may put it all together this year. We'll see. There's younger guys behind him. One of their other starters at corner, he's potentially even out for the game. And Devin Moore, a Naples, Florida native, I watched him coming out of high school himself. I think he had some tonsil issue going on this offseason, and he had to miss time, and he's lost playing weight. He has to get back to playing weight. So Florida's got a lot of question marks and a lot of injuries, and Miami's coming out relatively healthy out of camp, which I think is a blessing for them this year.
Mhm.
There's been a few minor injuries. Unfortunately, I can't get into that for anyone who's listening. It's a strict rule on that, but nothing too major for Miami or anything that would really concern anyone in terms of like true key players that are really going to impact this team this year. But on Miami's side, though, I just see in terms of both of their lines between the offensive and defensive lines, I don't think Florida has enough to keep up with that. And one of the trends I've noticed with Florida is and Miami, Florida has this basis right now, at least among their fan base and some of their writers and anyone that speaks on radio or anything of the sort. They are banking on potential. And I think potential is a very scary word because
Mhm.
there's nothing like proven production in college football. If you are a proven commodity, that's the biggest thing. You could have all the potential. You could be this big 5-star coming out of high school, but that all goes out the window once you get to college. They're banking on some pass rushers that haven't had much production to become big time guys this year, like Kelby Collins and Justice Boone, who were both highly rated recruits, but they haven't truly put it on tape yet. Uh, they did add a Division II defensive tackle who I think might be a surprise player in college football this year, and Joey Slackman, one of the better weight room warriors overall of any college football player in the country this year. But I I just don't see it with Florida's trenches. All of their issues on the right side of the line. Their offensive line was a bit shaky last year. Their defensive line has many questions. I think they have good linebackers, shaky defensive backs. They have some playmakers at wide receiver. Some injuries even going on there for them. And then you throw in the factor that Graham Mertz is a quarterback that he likes to play behind the sticks. He doesn't push the ball down the field. He's more of a play it safe quarterback, game manager type. I think that puts Florida in a predicament going into this game. And overall, if I had to break it down simply, I think between Miami's wide receivers that they have, mind you, Miami's one of only 2 teams in the country that has 3 receivers returning that had over 800 yards each
Mhm.
last season. So that's an incredible statistic in itself. Your running backs with Damian Martinez, who's arguably a top 10 running back in college football, and then Mark Fletcher being healthy and ready to go now, and Chris Johnson and AJ Allen having good camps, and I'm forgetting Jordan Lyle. Miami has a lot of weapons, and the other aspect to all of that, there's proven production there. This is not a situation where the Florida Gators side is like, oh well, we're expecting this guy to be this. No, Miami knows who Ruben Bain is. Miami
Mhm.
knows who Akeem Mesidor is. They know who Cam Ward is. They know who Damian Martinez is. I can go down the list. This is just the discourse that I see from the Florida side that there's not a lot of proven production. They're banking on a lot of guys to step up into bigger roles, and they haven't played big games yet, or not even enough games with experience yet. So
Mhm.
I just think Miami has more experience. They're deeper at many key positions. I think the one question mark is obviously how do the defensive backs react to playing out on the perimeter in the quick game. And then I just think they're just more physical with their lines. I think that's going to set the difference at the end of that game. I have Miami winning by 2 touchdowns, 34-20 in Gainesville. I think some people are going to be pleasantly surprised with how good Miami looks. I've been pessimistic in the past about Miami. This year is the first time in a long time I'm actually drinking the Kool-Aid. There's certain things I've seen at practice. There's certain things I've been told from the private practices that sound very encouraging. Obviously, I want to see it on the field, but I think Miami's a very legitimate team this year, and I do think that they beat Florida in just a few days from now.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the fact that Mark Fletcher is back is really, really going to help the team out because you're literally the Florida Gators. Your defensive line isn't as good as Miami's offensive line. And you're going to have to tackle two guys, one that averaged 6 yards a carry last season, and the other one averaged about 5.5 yards per carry last season. So it's going to be a very, I would say, brutal experience for the Gators having to bring those two guys out. And then when you mix it in with possibly, I think we will see a Chris Johnson sighting in the game as well because of speed. I think that it's going to be a very, very rough night for the Gators as well. One thing about the secondary is that that's considered the weakness of the Canes, but there are some ballers on that team. You know, we've heard good things about Marquise Williams, who led practice with 7 interceptions. Mish Powell playing in a national championship last season led with 5. So I think at the safety position, people might be surprised. And then you have the rise of OJ Frederic, who's been killing it in practice as a true freshman. So I do think that Miami, even though secondary may be a quote-unquote weakness on the defense, I do think they will surprise some people. I like the idea, even though I had him playing the boundary before the season started, but I like the idea of having Damari Brown at nickel. He's big, he's strong, he's physical, and he can tackle. So if you're talking about bringing a guy down like Trey Wilson on those bubble screens and swing passes, I think that a meeting between him and Damari Brown is not something that Trey Wilson is gonna want to have to go through. So that's where that's what I think, you know, as far as it goes as well, as far as the defensive side of the ball goes as well. On the offensive side, I think it's been very hard. And it's not so much the receivers. I think just the mismatches at tight end, if they do use a tight end this year, and I think they will, of Elijah Arroyo. Then you have, of course, Riley Williams, who's been playing very well in practice. Then you throw in the Swiss Army knife of Elijah Lofton. I don't see how Florida can keep up with all, because you really can't double anybody. You really can't, because the moment you double somebody, you're going to have somebody wide open or beating the man, and it's over. I mean, so I really don't know how Florida is going to be able to defend the Canes.
Yeah, I just think Miami's too deep at wide receiver. Their tight end room. I'll share with you this. Coach Lance Guidry told me this right before camp opened, and this is a guy who's working on the defensive side. He's not with those tight ends every day, but he doesn't have to say this because it's not his position group. But he said that tight end room, he believes that they are a special group. I've had comments shared with me coming out of private practices that the running backs room has been titled to certain things as elite, very great group. I want to see it on the field, obviously, but I think it's reasonable in a way because Damian Martinez, he's one of the top 10 returning running backs in the country. And actually, in terms of explosive runs, 20-plus yard runs, he's top 5 in that category returning to college football this year. And that's a huge thing for Miami to add because I think Miami's rushing attack was really good last year. The only thing they lacked was just those explosive runs, those home run threats. And I think just a mixture of having a healthy A.J. Allen, bringing in Damian Martinez into the mix, Chris Johnson with his speed, I think you could see a lot more chunk yardage plays in the terms of the run game too. So, yeah, Will, I just don't see it with Florida. I don't want to sound like a hater. I don't want to sound like I have the Miami Hurricanes orange and green glasses on, but I've watched both teams on tape, and just very objectively, I don't see many advantages that Florida has. I even think Miami has the advantage in terms of the special teams game too. Miami has the better kicker. It's not even a debate there. Andy Borregales is better than Trey Smack. The numbers speak for itself. And in terms of what he's done in games too, he's a legitimate All-American candidate this season. So that boils down in games too. You got to have a good kicker. Florida had some issues even with Trey Smack last year in terms of key crucial kicks that they needed him to hit, and he didn't in games. So I think it's going to be a really tough year just overall for Florida. Maybe a Florida Gator fan comes on here and comments on your show and says, "Oh, this guy is full of it" or whatnot. I'm just being very serious. I just think they have a little bit of too many key injuries at certain spots that would have helped them in this game in terms of Montreal Johnson being a big question mark that he still hasn't been cleared yet, or losing 2 defensive tackles. And then your secondary, which has a lot of returning guys, but they weren't that great last year. So how do you defend Miami's receiving core? Because they have those 3 receivers that went over 800 yards last year, but they also have a guy who's already shown production in games, and Isaiah Horton, who's taken another step. Then an Elijah Arroyo, who has shown it in the past and is healthy now, having the best camp of his career. I mean, just even the returns that have been told to me in terms of Elijah Arroyo and the things he's doing day in and day out of practice, Miami should have a legitimate Mackey Award contender with him too. As long as he's getting the ball, he's as good as anyone else in college football at that position.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I really do. And the fact that basically everything you said, I really can't see. I think it's going to be closer than 2 touchdowns just because it's the first game and it's the Swamp. So I predicted a 7-point Miami victory just because it's the Swamp. It's a rivalry game. A lot of these kids played each other in high school, so you have that element of the rivalry amongst teammates and former players from high school and stuff like that. So I think it'll be closer, but I do agree. I really can't see how Florida could keep up with the Canes, especially since there are definite disadvantages that the Gators have comparable to the Canes. The biggest weakness Miami has on the offensive line, and I'm using in quotation marks, is the fact they haven't yet said who the left guard is going to be, and both those guys are studs. Oh, you know who it is? Okay. I won't let you spoil it. I don't want you to get in trouble. So.
No, it's not getting in trouble. Someone had asked me in one of the spaces. This has been twice actually in recent weeks. They've asked me, who do you think the starting line is? And this is just what I know coming out of practice. I would expect that Miami's line left to right, you will see Jalen Rivers, Matthew McCoy.
I heard he was winning the battle.
Center, Zach Carpenter, right guard, Inez Cooper, and your right tackle, Francis Mauignola. And actually, Ryan Rodriguez has really come on at the end of camp. He's one of those swing guys on that line that you could throw in between guard or center in a pinch if someone needs to come out of the game, or you want to get reps for another guy. He could do that. So, yeah, Will, I think two of the keys to the victory, I'll put it this way, is Miami needs to get up early. You need to control that environment. And I think you do that by the pass game. You have big-time playmakers at wide receiver that can break the game open. And you have to put them away in the second half with your run game. Once you're up, you have to put them away. I do think it'll be a tight game throughout. I just see Miami's physicality taking over heading into the end of that third quarter, going into the fourth. I think that's what truly makes the difference there.
I agree. Now another important part of this game is going to be recruiting, right, as well. Although losing to Florida doesn't hurt Miami's season per se. They could run through the table. As a matter of fact, I think it was a JD. Oh my gosh, what's his name from On 3?
JD Pickle.
Yeah, JD Pickle. JD Pickle had them losing to Florida, but running the table against everybody else. So it doesn't really make Miami season to lose to Florida comparable to Florida losing to Miami, where it could be a bad precedent for them, throughout the rest of the season. But I do think I agree with you. You said on Locked On Canes. I do think that it does kind of play a role in recruiting. So it's very important for Miami to win this football game for the basis of recruiting and to flip some guys and so on. So with Miami, if Miami does win or lose, how do you think it will affect the recruiting overall picture? Will Miami lose out on guys they are really ahead for, or will they lose guys within this recruiting class as well because they may not be as good as advertised on paper?
I don't think it would be so much from within. I think they would lose some battles from the outside that they're still working on in terms of certain receivers they're going after, a couple of defensive backs that they're still looking at. For the most part, it would be those spots that would be affected, and then some defensive linemen that they're looking interior guys. I do think Miami needs this win more than Florida. If you ask me my opinion, I don't think Florida's going to win any more than 5 games this year. Just between their schedule, what those teams that they're going to play this year, and what they're returning on their rosters, I don't know. We'll see how it ends up for Billy Napier this year. But in terms of Mario Cristobal, I think you have to win this game, especially from a recruiting standpoint, as I mentioned, but also momentum too. You have to set the tone for your season, and I think this is almost like a litmus test of where is this program now, because it's a big environment, rivalry game, start of the season. If you go out there and you win that game and you win it convincingly, you start to change the perception. And I've always brought this up in terms of recruiting. People ask me the question, "Oh, why is it that this South Florida kid or this kid in the state of Florida says, 'Oh, I need to see Miami win?'" And I always say it brutally. I hate to say it, but it's the truth that Miami has averaged to be about a 7.5 win team
Hmm.
year in, year out for some time now. Yeah, there's some outliers. You know, you have a 9 win team or 10 win team here or there, but you have to change that perception that where these kids, and I've heard it out of kids' mouths before in the 7-on-17. Some kids are like, "Oh, Miami," or "Oh, same old Miami." You have to change that perception. I think Mario has done a good job of doing that. I think Miami was much better than the record even showed last year.
Hmm.
I've been saying it nonstop throughout the entire offseason that it's not winning. It's not winning football having a quarterback averaging about 2.5 interceptions per
Yeah.
a 5.5 game stretch. You can't win like that, and he put them in many bad situations. I wish him well at his new school, but I think they were about a 9 win team last year. Realistically, they lost 2 games that they could have won. But this year, you bring in all those guys to the transfer portal. You've brought in 2 recruiting classes. That one was a top 10 recruiting class, which fell right around like sixth, seventh in the country.
Hmm.
And the class that you just brought in now was a top 5 class, arguably top 3, depending on what recruiting service you're looking at. He's changed the perception in terms of, yeah, there's talent coming here, there's guys coming here, but you have to put it all together on the field. And I think,
Hmm.
especially heading into your 3rd year, uh, especially with the landscape now having the transfer portal, I think it speeds up that process of expectations, whether it's from fans or administration. That usually in the past, before the portal, it used to be a 4 to 5 year process that when a coach took on a job that to see out their vision. I think that that time length is much shorter now because of the
Yeah.
portal. And again, you got all these proven guys that have produced at the collegiate level that came in. Mario Cristobal has to produce this year with those guys. He has to have a good year. And people have asked me, what is a good year? I think anything less than 10 wins is a disappointment considering what they have on the roster coming into this season.
Yeah, no, I agree. I say 10 wins or bust. I think there's no reason on paper why this team can't win 10 games. Even if Georgia Tech is proven to be a little better, or even if Virginia Tech is a little better, you're much more talented, and you only use the portal to fill in holes. It wasn't like you overhauled your entire team. No, you didn't overhaul your entire team. You have the portal to fill in holes. You fill in your hole at quarterback. You added depth to your running back position. You added to your defensive tackle position as well. Yeah, you lost 2 guys to the NFL. In your safety position, you added Mish Powell. So you filled in holes, and then your recruiting class has been great. Okay, on paper it's been great. They're all very competitive. I mean, they're all very competitive players. They came in, within the first couple of years that Mario recruited. So there's no excuse. It's 10 wins or bust. You should at least win 10 games. Especially after what we saw at Florida State, I really don't see. I mean, they could improve. They could change the quarterback, whatever. But I just don't see how Florida State is this world beater with DJU at quarterback. I do think that you got him at home this year. You have a Cam Ward who's very proven. You should win that football game. So I do think a 10, 11 wins or bust. That's my take on the Canes. That's pretty much where I'm at.
I agree with you 100%. And I think the matter that comes into play, let's say in a hypothetical world, if Miami somehow lost this first game, and I don't expect them to, but anything can happen. It's if anyone remembers the movie with Al Pacino and LL Cool J, that old football movie, Any Given Sunday,
Yep.
with the Miami Sharks and
Yes.
Fox. Great classic for anyone that's a football fan. I highly suggest you watch it. Any given Saturday, and anything can happen, obviously. So even though I expect Miami to win, and I do believe they should win, I think they arguably have the better roster top to bottom compared to Florida. But there's many variables that come into play in football. Sometimes the better team doesn't always win. So I think what happens is if Miami and Mario Cristobal do not go out there and have a good year, if they go out there and lay an egg, and let's say it's a middling season, if that they win 7 or 8 games considering the roster that they have and the makeup of the schedule this year, I think you see a situation where Mario's not going to be fired. That's not happening. I know that just from internally, but you start creating a situation where Mario is playing from behind the 8 ball at that point, where you can only sell a vision for so long to recruits and guys coming into the program until questions start being raised about, well, where is the direction? Where are we headed? Where is the improvement? And I think if Miami does have a season like that, where they don't live up to those expectations, I think you could see potentially guys leaving for other teams. And this happens around college football. It's a very real thing. Again, we don't want to talk about the doom and gloom, but I've always tried to live by this saying that hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And
Yes.
you will always be fine if you go by that mindset. So we got to see it on the field. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. I agree with you, and hopefully it's a tail whooping, man. Hopefully we go in there and get the victory, get the W out at Gainesville. The day before the game, there is a recruit that Miami and a bunch of schools are after, and that's Jamie French. His recruitment has been all over the place. First, Miami's in the lead, then you have Texas in the lead, and then you have other schools in the lead as well. Now Tennessee has jumped into that mix in the conversation as well for Jamie French. Where are you at with Jamie? Do you know what's going on in terms of where he's leaning, and what school he may be going to? And if he does pick Miami on Friday, should we like put him on flip watch as well? It's like where do we stand, and where do you think Jamie French is eventually going to land?
Whew. Jamie French, his recruitment has been all over the place. So we'll try to streamline this. Miami was the first school to offer him.
Okay.
He was committed to Alabama up until Nick Saban left. When he decommitted, a lot of Ohio State buzz. Miami was trying to get in the picture. That was early on near winter, heading into the spring. Texas got involved. Tennessee, LSU. I know Georgia tried to get in there at one point too. Ohio State's not even in the picture anymore. It's been very much all over the place. There was a lot of buzz about Texas coming out of the spring into the summer. LSU got some momentum. He has some family that lives out there, but between Louisiana and Florida. And then I mentioned, I think this was, let's see, we're near the end of August. This was around the end of June. I brought up in one of the spaces one day, and everyone started freaking out. They're like, wait, what is Gio talking about? I mentioned that the communication between Miami and Jamie French has stayed consistent throughout the entire process, that there's never really been these up and downs like it has been with other teams where, he has like a new leader or new team he's leaning to every X amount of weeks. Miami was always a constant, consistent mainstay in that recruitment. Now, that doesn't mean I think Miami ends up landing him, well, in terms of his commitment in the next couple of days here. But I expect him to commit to Texas this week.
Okay.
I don't expect any surprises or anything of the sort. I haven't been told anything along those lines. But I think if you are a school recruiting Jamie French, I don't think you necessarily want to be his commitment right now. I think you want to be his final decision in December. I think he's one of those guys that there's a couple guys like this every year that they kind of bounce around between each school and they're really undecided and kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of like this school, I kind of like that school, up until the end of the cycle when they have to put pen to paper and really make a decision.
Hmm.
Those guys end up flipping to another school. So I don't think you want to be Jamie French's commitment right now. I think you want to be that school that's in it, like December 8th, 9th, 10th, right when you're getting to the early signing period. I think you want to be in it right there. So I expect a Texas commitment from him in the next couple of days, but Miami will continue to recruit him.
Okay. Um, if not JB French, we had a conversation prior to recording this episode. There's some Dallas Wilson's talk still, even though supposedly he shut his recruitment down. And there's also talk about the Florida receiver Joshua Moore. Where are the Canes in that situation? How realistic is even Moore, depending on the outcome of Saturday, and how realistic is Dallas Wilson as well?
So Joshua Moore out of West Broward High School, right here in Broward County. That's actually where I live now. Raised in Miami-Dade, but made my way up here some years ago.
Yeah, me too.
It seems like almost all of us are.
Yeah.
It's different now. The Dade is very different than what it was when I was growing up. But
Definitely.
with Joshua Moore though, Miami, Florida, and Florida State have been the three mainstays in terms of that recruitment. I know both Miami and Florida State are still going after him. He's shared some comments about wanting to see how Miami does this year. I do know that he did recently visit Miami before the dead period took place. So that's always a very big thing to watch. You always watch the visits. Where are these kids going? Sometimes there's secret visits that take place. By the way, Cane fans, it is secret visit season. Around this time last year, Miami was sneaking in Jordan Lyle into Hard Rock Stadium. We were told to keep it quiet, though. So yeah, no, I it was the first home game. I see Jordan Lyle walking in, and I'm like, wait a minute, what is he doing here? And then I asked someone, and they're like, they told me, they're like, no, you can't put that out right now, dude. We're trying to keep it under wraps and everything. So we sometimes we play ball. With him, I think Miami has a legitimate shot there. I know he's watching this Miami and Florida game very closely. I believe he's visiting, actually. I know Dallas Wilson will be out there too, and a lot of other big names that Miami's going after. We'll see. Still have to play out a whole season. He's not one of the only names that's in the mix there. You have Tyler Williams, that is from Armwood High School, that Miami was one of the first schools to identify, actually. He was a 3-star recruit.
Hmm.
Miami and UCF were going after him, and he started blowing up throughout the spring in the 7-on-7 scene as well. You get to the summer, and all of a sudden, the Georgia Bulldogs come around with a official scholarship for him, saying, "Hey, do you want to come play for a national championship winning program?" And this is something that Miami's battled a bit in the past, that there's been kids they've identified early, and then some of these other schools that have had a lot of success recently, they hop in and they kind of steal their thunder. And that changes when I mean about perception and all that stuff earlier. I was talking about with Mario and having to win big games. That will help a lot in that aspect. So Tyler Williams is a name to write down on your notes, Cane fans. Tyler Williams, Joshua Moore, those are two names still very actively being recruited there at receiver. Again, he's committed to Georgia, but Miami's still going after him. There's a couple other SEC programs involved there. For Nell Brown, I've actually gotten a lot of questions about the Florida Gators legacy. I just think it's very much a long shot there for Miami to really get in that. His legacy with Florida is much more deeply entrenched compared to a Ben Hanks Jr., who the 4-star cornerback out of Booker T. Washington. Miami's still going to be in that one all the way till signing day. That one's not anywhere even close to over. But I've been asked the question about Vernell Brown, and I just think it's going to be very difficult for Miami to try to pry him away from Florida. Again, you never know what happens if Florida ends up having a new coach, they have a bad season. A lot of things can come into play, but yeah, those names. And the last one I'll bring up, Dallas Wilson, as you mentioned. He's said all the right things to Oregon. He's reportedly said that he's shut down his recruitment. That's not true. Usually what happens in a lot of recruiting situations when you're a high profile kid and it's the summertime, we're not even talking about winter, and you're saying that, oh yeah, I'm shutting down my recruitment. 9 times out of 10, these kids are still taking calls from other schools. And it's because their parents are advising them, their coaches are advising them. You never shut doors when there's opportunities. You listen and hear what everyone is telling you, and then you kind of make your informed decision from there. I will say this again, though. Miami, out of all the receivers that I had just mentioned, they're in the best position with him.
Okay.
I've been told from a source very close to that recruitment that Miami can truthfully pull that off by signing day.
Okay. Wow. That's great. I like Dallas Wilson.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's really talented.
I really do like Dallas Wilson. I actually like Tyler Williams as well. I was very impressed when I looked him up when Miami was in on him. So if they're in with Tyler, I'd be happy with Tyler as well. With any name you mentioned, I would be happy to snag him as a second receiver. I do think, though, that Vernell Brown is their Duke Johnson, that no matter what, he's just going to stay in Florida, no matter who the head coach is. And that's the way I felt about Duke. He grew up a Canes fan, and he was entrenched with Miami. So I think that's where Vernell Brown is as well. I think that he's just Florida through and through. But I do agree with you on Ben Hanks. I do think Ben Hanks could be flippable depending on how the season goes. Go ahead, Gio.
With Vernell Brown too. With Vernell Brown, the other thing with him is his family, not only just from the legacy side and him being like the third in line in that family to want to end up going to Florida. I know from speaking to some people that his father's very well involved in terms of athletics with the Florida Gators, especially even in the NIL scene as well for them. So there's just a lot connecting them there. There's a lot of things Miami would have to battle there to even try to pry him away from Florida. I do know they made it interesting, though. He definitely heard out Miami. He was definitely considering them, but Florida just has a lot leaning their way in terms of his recruitment overall. And last note I'll mention, this is maybe a puff my chest moment because I mentioned this. Alex Dono asked me this question many months ago on Locked On Canes. Who is a 5-star prospect that many Cane fans may not be keyed in on, but they should get very familiar with heading into the season and then near the end of the recruiting cycle, and that they could potentially flip? I know I mentioned Dallas Wilson, but I'm going to bring up again. There is a 5-star offensive lineman out of Jacksonville, Florida, that I've brought up a couple times, Solomon Thomas. He's committed to Florida State. Continue to watch that one closely. Continue to watch that one closely throughout the rest of the cycle. Miami has a chance to corral him in before the end of the cycle. I know he's going to take a couple game day visits. Miami's on the dock there as well, along with a couple other SEC schools. So we'll let it play out.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that he's on flip watch, and I do think that if it does happen, it'll be late November, early December, during flip season, right before signing day. So that's where I think it's going to happen with Solomon Thomas. I mean, Miami's offensive line is much improved. You'll have a head coach that is totally dedicated to the offensive line. And Alex Merville is one of the best in the country, in terms of development. So I see that. I totally agree with you. I see that flip happening. From the moment I saw he got picked up on X, I'm like, Miami's going to be on that one, for the entire cycle. There's no way that Florida State's going to have it that easy to keep that kid, so we'll see. I agree with you.
Miami's been recruiting him for well over 2 years. They were one of the first ones on him since Cristobal came in. Florida State fans thought it was very much locked, seal, and done. Some Florida fans even thought that they could flip him. Miami's in a good spot there. It's not being talked about a lot publicly, but that is one to watch as we get down this stretch over the next couple months.
Yeah. I agree with you, and I hope you're right, because that would be a great get for the Canes. I'll tell you that much. Another player to beef up the trenches. Gio, you're involved in a lot of things, okay? You were recently with Life Wallet, and you've moved on, and you're starting your own venture. So I'd like you to take the time and promote whatever next venture you are doing for yourself, for your family, for your business, etc. So there you go.
Yes, of course. So as Will mentioned, I moved on from Life Wallet, spent about 1.5 to 2 years in the NIL space, worked with a ton of our athletes with Canes football, Canes basketball, and some on the swimming team, golf, many athletes at the University of Miami. It was a great experience in itself, but along the way, I also realized something from that experience, that I kind of wanted to do my own thing. I've worked for other big companies before in the past. I've come to this point now that I've felt it's time to start my own thing, and I've opened up my own business. I'm not going away from covering the Canes. I'm going to be covering other things as well that I've dabbled in already in terms of the NFL, NBA, a couple other sports as well. Football or soccer, if you're American. I'm Cuban myself, so so yeah, you could find me on X at Milian, or the business corporation account is also at Global Entertainment Sports Online, or Geos, GEOS _Inc. And I'm also opening up my very own YouTube channel at Gio Milian on YouTube. Have a brand new show that is coming that many people will be really excited about. I'll actually drop it here. Alex Dano, Amon Richards, and Marsh and I are hosting a weekly show on Wednesdays that fans can call in, or anyone in general can call in. We're going to have special guests at times, weekly, every Wednesday at 7 o'clock at night, around that time. I hope you're all very excited about it. It's actually called Who Wants Smoke?
That's great. So the premise, it'll be like an old school radio talk show where audiences can actually call in and get upset with you guys, chop it up with you guys. So that's pretty cool. That's interesting, man. Man, Donald's everywhere.
Yeah,
so are you actually?
It was funny because I had a conversation with Dono about it, and I told him, I said, it's kind of like how radio was, but a little bit of a twist on it now. And he loved the idea.
All right. Well, congratulations, man. Very happy for you, man. Thank you so much for telling us, announcing that here on 305 Sports Now. You're always welcome, to come on here and chop it up, Canes. You are one of the best when it comes to covering the Canes, and I love your inside detail of the team as well, and all you contribute to the Cane Spear, whether it's on X, whether it's on any aspect of social media, or whether it's appearing on shows like this one. Thank you so much again, Gio, for coming on. We really appreciate you. And ladies and gentlemen, once Gio Milian launches that channel, please subscribe. You can also follow him on X as well, at X at Gio Milian as well. So do not forget to follow him. He follows you right back as well. So ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you heard, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to 305 Sports Now. Once again, for Gio Milian, I am Will. Stay safe. God bless. See you soon. Go Canes. All about the UMB Florida. Bye-bye, guys.